Hello there, and welcome to Murder Most British. I'm Zach.
Hi, you're welcome. I'm Rachel.
Yeah, all right, let's go. After last week's insanity in Wales.
We're heading over to Scotland this week, aren't we?
Yeah. Wow. After last week, I'm like, oh, gosh.
I can hear your belly.
I'm probably just a little bit hungry.
Yeah.
This one was very interesting with motive and the Scottish legal system at the time and all that.
What date are we heading back to?
The 1850s.
Wow. This is an old one then.
Yeah, definitely.
Bit of history though. I love it.
Yeah, but it also touches on some things that we've touched on in another previous Scottish episode. But
Well, before we begin, just a small request from us.
If you enjoy listening to our true crime stories, please give us a like, a follow, and a 5-star rating. That would be amazing. Also, follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Murder Most British and Facebook at MMB Podcast.
Yep, you can also join us in the public crypt chat, which is our free Discord channel where you can talk about cases, share theories, and read the latest news from the archive.
Your support helps the archive grow and ensures that no story is ever forgotten. Also, this episode contains discussion of death by poisoning and the examination of private relationships in a criminal trial. Some material might be distressing, so listener discretion is advised. So now, let's get to the story.
A letter sits on a desk, folded twice and sealed with care. The handwriting is neat, deliberate, the kind taught to young women expected to be read and judged. The words inside are cautious, nothing reckless. The first lines are careful, but the correspondence doesn't stay careful for long. In 1850s Glasgow, this is how secrets travel. Not spoken, not confessed, written, then hidden. Outside the city keeps its order. Everything looks as it should. But when letters leave the desk, they begin to matter. Because in a city built on appearances, one question soon takes hold. How fragile is a life that looks perfectly safe from the outside?
By the middle of the 19th century, Glasgow was changing faster than almost any city in Britain. Industry and trade brought money and opportunity, but also anxiety, fear of disorder, moral decline, and losing control. In response, respectability became a defense. What mattered most wasn't private behavior, but public appearance. Stability had to be visible, something you could read from the street rather than behind closed doors. You could see those values built directly into places like Blytheswood Hill, where broad terraces and inward-facing gardens signaled wealth without display and order without noise.
Well, that mindset shaped daily life. Middle-class existence was expected to look orderly and predictable, governed as much by expectation as by law, with reputation belonging to families rather than individuals. Nowhere was that pressure stronger than on daughters, whose conduct could quietly elevate or seriously damage an entire household. Madeleine Hamilton Smith was born into that world in 1835 at her family home on Wellington Place, the first of 5 children in a professional, reputation-dependent Glasgow family.
Her father, James Smith, was a successful architect and surveyor, and her mother, Elizabeth, came from equally established stock, the daughter of the neoclassical architect David Hamilton. In 1835, when Madeleine was 19, the family moved to 7 Blytheswood Square, occupying the lower half of a townhouse owned by her uncle. The address marked an arrival socially, placing them among Glasgow's most respectable residents.
By 21, Madeleine was legally an adult, but in practice still tightly controlled. She lived under strict parental authority with little independence of her own. Where she went, who she saw, and what her future would look like were decisions largely made for her. As the eldest daughter, she was expected to set the example and protect the family's standing. Her behaviour reflecting not just on herself, but on everyone connected to her.
You wouldn't have been You wouldn't have lasted that long.
I'm not very...
You don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, I don't like to be controlled, I don't think. But then they obviously start all this from early ages.
From birth.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
This takes me to what am I been watching? I just watched the 4th season of not Downton Abbey. What's the other one? It's
Bridgerton.
Bridgerton. So it's kind of like feels like that type of era.
Yeah.
Where you got your social standing people, your lords, and
your reputation matters more than anything else.
Interesting. What a time to live in, eh?
Yeah. Well, her education reinforced that role. She learned music, languages, and careful letter writing, not for self-expression, but as proof of refinement and restraint. Ambition was discouraged. Strong emotion was treated with suspicion. Courtship followed the same logic. Meetings watched, suitors checked, marriages chosen as much for stability as for affection. Parents had to prove everything. A single hint of scandal could undo years of careful respectability, and once a boundary was crossed, there were few acceptable ways back.
I mean, it sounds like pretty good sort of structure, but the pros and cons to this type of social, living standards of right, you're doing everything I say, you're going to meet this suitor because I choose to have you meet this suitor.
Well, because if you're tarnished, then you're not going to get a good husband or whatever,
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, things like that is good, and it probably should still be around a little bit today. But, like I said, there's pros and cons to this type of...
I think it depends on the scandal.
Yeah.
She wore the wrong dress to the ball.
Exactly.
That's not good. Come on. But, go sneaking around doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing.
A bit... disrespectful in the sense, and bringing sort of a bit of shame in that way. Yeah.
But if you're pursuing your own love, you're pursuing your own heart, that's discouraged.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you have to marry this person because they're respectable and they're safe.
Yeah.
And they're all it's like, well, I love this person.
Yeah.
They complete me, that type of, nah.
They've set that aside, obviously.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the city itself was becoming harder to police. Boarding houses, busy streets, and expanding railways allowed people to move more freely and slip through spaces where no one knew them well. Privacy became possible in small, ordinary ways. The rules stayed strict, but enforcing them grew harder. It was within this changing Glasgow that Madeleine Smith met Pierre-Emile Langelier. Oh, I've got to speak French. Great.
Yeah.
Wish me luck, guys.
Pierre-Emile Langelier.
Maybe you need to step in with the French. I'm not too good with French.
Langelier.
Langelier.
Yeah, it's spelled L'Angelier.
Yeah, see, I would have called that L'Angelier. Angelier. Anyway, from this point, we will refer to him as
Emile. Yes, just to make it easier on ourselves, but yeah.
And especially me.
Well, Emile had been born in the Channel Islands and was roughly 10 years older than Madeleine. Widely assumed to be French, he lived outside respectable society's inner circles, moving between rented lodgings and short-term work. By the mid-1850s, he was employed as a packing clerk on Bothwell Street, close to the commercial center, but far from Madeleine's sheltered world. His background alone made him unsuitable. Marriage between them was unrealistic from the start.
Their relationship didn't unfold in drawing rooms or promenades, where it could be observed and approved. It developed quietly through late-night meetings arranged away from the family home, and above all, through letters. In Victorian Britain, correspondence was one of the few private spaces available to young women, a way to express feelings out of sight. But letters carried risks too. Servants handled the post. Landladies watched routines. And once written, a page could be kept, copied, or discovered.
Uh-oh.
Dum, dum, dum.
Yeah, there's always that chance that the wrong person will get your
Yep.
letter or intercept your letter
Yep.
and read it and go, uh-oh, shame,
Mm-hmm.
and just totally destroy your life.
Definitely could fall into the wrong hands quite easily.
There's a lot of trust in like that the servants, people employed in the house don't open them.
Yeah.
And don't go, oh, I better run off to daddy and be like, uh-oh, your daughter's doing, what are you doing opening up our letters?
Yep.
But all the while, Madeleine's parents were planning her future, unaware of what was happening beneath their own roof. They identified a suitable match within their circle, William Harper Minnick, a prosperous merchant living directly above them in Blythe Square. Damn, that seems pretty
This is quite
convenient. We found a guy for you.
Yeah, he's upstairs.
He lives up. Can you believe it?
Didn't have to go too far to look.
Well, he was respectable, established, and approved. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
By every conventional measure, he was exactly what a family like theirs was meant to want. Yet at the same time, Madeleine's correspondence with Emile deepened, stretching from late 1855 into early 1857. It's like
3 years.
Couple years,
2 years of love notes.
Yeah, a couple of years worth of, and they're meeting and that,
Yep.
uh-oh.
Well, ending it was not straightforward. Marriage was the only respectable outcome, and marriage to Emile was impossible. So outwardly, nothing changed. Madeleine continued to meet every expectation placed upon her, maintaining appearances while her private life moved in a direction from which there was no easy return. In a city that prized discretion and control, that kind of double life left very little room for error.
Uh-oh. So she's being fixed up with a suitor, but she's been having a secret little...
Following her heart.
Yeah. And now, what is she going to do? She's stuck between a rock and a hard place. She loves this man, but then she's...
Her parents are going to push her to marry this guy upstairs.
Yeah. But what if...
What a pickle.
But what if the other guy's like, no, you marry me?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
We shall find out.
Emile hadn't been especially well for months. His landlady later said he'd started complaining as far back as January, with a sore throat, then boils, and then stomach trouble. When the sickness hit, it hit hard. Stomach pain, vomiting, and what she described as bowel complaints. He'd rally, then drop again. It became a pattern. Collapse, partial recovery, relapse. Enough times that it started to feel like just his health, just the way it is. Even as each round seemed to take more out of him.
And in 1850s Glasgow, that didn't automatically look suspicious. People living in rented rooms got ill all the time. Emile treated it like something he had to ride out. He used remedies, tried to rest, and went back to work when he could. After one of the early illnesses, his landlady remembered him bringing home laudanum. Essentially, it's an opium dissolved in alcohol.
Ooh, goodness gracious.
Pretty strong opium. Yeah. After his death, there were bottles and powders in the room. Nothing about that screams crime in the moment. It reads a man managing recurring illnesses.
Yeah. I think at the time you just get stuff. You're like, oh, well, okay,
Let's try this. I mean, we do it nowadays, don't we? We're like, oh, we'll try this. If this isn't working, we'll try this.
It's just crazy that they're like, just go grab the opium.
Yeah. I mean, back in those days, I think they had the strong stuff.
Oh, yeah. Good God. Well, then came March. Emile had gone to Bridge of Allen to recruit to build his strength back up. But on Sunday, the 22nd, he returned unexpectedly to Glasgow. His landlady, Mrs. Jenkins, said he told her a letter had been forwarded to him and it brought him home, but he planned to go back again at the next morning. It sounded like a brief stop, a detour, a decision made quickly. But it's a detail that matters because it places a letter and urgency right before the final hours.
Just after 2:30 in the morning, Mrs. Jenkins was woken by violent ringing at the door. When she opened it, Emil was standing there with his arms across his stomach, clearly in pain. He told her, quote, "I am very bad. I am going to have another attack of that vomiting." She helped him up to his room and tried what she could. But it got worse, fast. It wasn't mild sickness, it was immediate, intense and frightening, enough that she decided she needed a doctor.
Yeah, I think at some point you're just like, this isn't as like it was before.
This is a bit more serious.
Yeah, like he complained of all this stuff before and it wasn't as bad, but he's just really bad. So at 5:00, she went for the nearest doctor, Dr. Stephen. He didn't come at first. Instead, he sent instructions, laudanum and a mustard plaster. But Emil didn't improve. By 7, she called again, and this time Dr. Stephen attended. She described Emil as shrunken, with a weak pulse, in severe physical and mental depression. The doctor gave morphia and then left, believing time and quiet would see him through. That judgment, hopeful, is part of what makes the morning so grim.
So morphia obviously is morphine.
Yeah. More of the fucking hard stuff, baby.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
I mean, it doesn't sound like he's doing too good. Well, Emil wasn't convinced. After the visit, he asked what the doctor thought. And when Mrs. Jenkins said the doctor believed he would get over it, Emil replied, quote, "I am far worse than the doctor thinks. He kept saying the same thing, that if he could just sleep, he'd be better." Around 9:00, she asked if there was anyone he wanted to see. Emil named a friend, Miss Perry, and gave an address. Mrs. Jenkins sent for her, then returned quickly, thinking he'd finally drifted off.
Dr. Stevens came back soon after. Mrs. Jenkins told him Emil had just fallen asleep, and it seemed a pity to wake him, but the doctor insisted on seeing him. He went to the bed, felt for a pulse, and lifted Emil's head, and the head fell back down. Emil was dead. Miss Perry arrived too late. People began to gather, another lodger, a grocer who shut Emil's eyes, and soon word was sent to his employers. The room that had been private only hours before became a scene of witnesses and whispers.
And this is the hinge point, the moment it stops being a bad death and becomes a troubling death. After Emil died, colleagues came, including Stevenson from his workplace. Mrs. Jenkins later described his clothes laid out on the sofa. A letter was taken from a pocket. She recognised it as the letter that had arrived on the Saturday. The sense in the room changes right there, from illness to implication. Letters mean a meeting. A meeting means a timeline. And a timeline means questions.
Yep. Why did he come back in a hurry, even though he wasn't right? And then he went out, met someone, came back, and went down into a bad way.
Yeah, very suspicious.
Well, Emil left no explanation. He didn't name anyone. He didn't describe where he'd been the previous evening. In fact, his landlady said she did not ask where he'd been at night. She only knew there was a, quote, private correspondence, not who it was with. So the final hours stayed blank, but the details around them didn't. The sudden return from Bridge of Allen after a forwarded letter, the violent collapse at 2:30 a.m., the doctor's treatment, the brief hope of sleep, and then the abrupt end. Once the letters surfaced, those gaps suddenly mattered.
More bundles of letters were found tied up amongst his things. Months of private correspondence had been carefully kept. One of the men going through them reportedly said the contents seemed to explain all. Outside, Glasgow carried on as usual. But inside that small lodging house, a young man had died suddenly, violently, and without a word of explanation. By the time the door finally closed behind the last visitor, the room no longer felt private.
For a few days, nothing official happened. Emil was buried in St. David's churchyard, the way most sudden deaths were handled quickly and quietly. But the unease didn't go away. His employers kept thinking about the letters found in his room and about the fact that he had rushed back to Glasgow after receiving one, only to collapse hours later. The details didn't sit right, so they reported everything to the procurator fiscal and asked for the death to be looked at more closely.
That request changed the course of the case. Because he had already been buried, doctors couldn't examine him properly without bringing him back out of the ground. So on the 31st of March, barely a week after the funeral, the body was exhumed. The coffin was reopened, a formal post-mortem was carried out. Samples of the stomach and organs were removed for chemical testing. And when the results came back, they were clear. Arsenic. Not just in one place, but throughout his whole body. From that moment on, this wasn't being treated as an illness anymore. It was treated as poisoning.
If it wasn't for them people doubting it and going to the procurator fiscal and saying, yo, this looks suspicious, he would have just been buried, and then that would have been that. They should, well, people die, people get ill, and
especially back in them days, obviously they didn't really have great treatments or anything we do now, sort of. And
they had some good stuff here and there, but it wasn't obviously like it is now. But if it wasn't for those people, man, that's crazy. So with that finding, the case passed fully into official hands. The procurator fiscal opened a formal inquiry and began gathering statements, records, and sworn accounts. Officials needed to know where Emil had been, who he had seen, what he had eaten, and who had regular access to him in the weeks before he died.
With poisoning confirmed, investigators began reconstructing his final weeks. This was no longer about why a young man had fallen sick. It was about who might have given it to him. From that point forward, every step was treated as criminal. Names were taken, timelines built, movements checked. What had begun as a private death now became a homicide inquiry.
After that, the approach became, really methodical. They're like, okay, they started speaking to everybody he knew, his employer, his landlady, neighbors, acquaintances, building a picture of his everyday life. And that picture was small and predictable. He worked when he could, stayed home when he was sick, and rarely ate with others. He didn't mix much. That routine helped narrow things down, showing exactly who had regular private access to him. That routine helped narrow things down, showing exactly who had regular private access to him during those final weeks.
Doctors then mapped out the illnesses themselves. Each attack in February and March was dated alongside no meetings and letters. On paper, a pattern emerged. He'd collapse, slowly recover, then fall sick again. Over and over. The spacing didn't look like infection, it looked staged. Other explanations were tested and ruled out. Nothing fit except repeated doses of arsenic, taken gradually, weakening him until his body finally gave out.
So the searches followed as well. His room was examined first, and inside were those letters, dozens and dozens of them, folded, bundled, and preserved. Not summaries, not notes, full correspondence. And that's when they go off to the Smith house. Because there, more drafts and replies were found in Madeleine's bedroom. Together, they covered months and months of contact. More importantly, they were dated. That gave investigators something solid, exact dates of when they were meeting. They could now place those meetings, messages, and illnesses side by side and see how closely that they lined up.
Well, attention turned next to arsenic itself. In Glasgow, it wasn't rare or restricted. You could buy it legally from a chemist for everyday household use. So simply having it proved nothing.
That sounds crazy as fuck.
Yeah, imagine it.
Just going off down to the shop to buy some arsenic.
Obviously, you can't do that nowadays. But yeah, shop books were checked, assistants were questioned. Several remembered serving Madeleine Smith personally, selling her small amounts in the weeks before Emil's last illness. That didn't prove that she'd used it, but it did place the poison in her hands at a very specific time.
Yeah, you're starting to kind of piece it together. Saying, well, they were together at these times. She's been buying arsenic. He was poisoned by arsenic.
And she was buying, like, small amounts that purposely seems, well, it could be these small amounts are the ones that have been administered to poor Emile.
Yeah. Well, by now, the case existed almost entirely on paper. Medical reports, letters, shop records, conversations with servants about who carried parcels, and notes between addresses. No one had seen poison given, and Emile himself had named no one. But when everything was laid out all together, his illnesses, their meetings, the purchases, the same connections kept appearing. The same relationship sat at the center of every timeline.
Well, that was enough. On the 31st of March, 1857, that very day, the exhumation results came back. A warrant was issued. Madeleine Smith was arrested, questioned, and taken to Glasgow prison to await what came next. The quiet behind-the-scenes work was over. From here on, the case would move out of private rooms and into public view. No longer an investigation, but a prosecution.
Yep, the one thing that they don't want, a public scandal.
Yep, that's not going to do very good for their societal standing.
Yeah, because it's all going to come out. Well, on the 30th of June, 1857, the trial of Madeleine Smith opened in Edinburgh before the High Court of Justiciary. It lasted 9 days, and from the first morning, it was clear this was no ordinary murder case. The courtroom filled early, and seats were scarce. Reporters lined the benches with notebooks open, copying every word that they could. Newspapers printed long extracts the next day, sometimes whole passages verbatim, because this case did not turn on eyewitness drama, but on documents, on what had been written and preserved in private.
The charge itself was simple but severe. The Crown alleged that Smith murdered Pierre-Emile Langelier. Sorry, I'm very good at French.
Langelier, yeah, excellent.
That was better than the first time I tried to say it.
Close enough.
Well, the Crown alleged that she'd murdered Pierre with arsenic, not in a single act, but gradually, through repeated doses over time. There was no struggle and no public scene, only a steady decline that ended in death. From the outset, everyone understood the same thing. The case would rise or fail on circumstantial evidence, rather than any direct proof of the act itself. No one had seen the poison given. No one could place it in her hand.
Yeah, the hardest is the circumstantial.
Yep, no smoking gun.
Yeah, but as long as you can place that timeline, you can place that circumstantial
it's like a puzzle,
evidence
isn't
together.
It? And at the end of the day, everything will all the pieces will come together and form a picture.
Yeah.
So, this picture points to her.
Oh, yeah. He was fine, or whatever, and then he started getting these illnesses, and then all
around
of a sudden,
the time of meeting her. So, being out.
Yeah. So the prosecution began with medical testimony. Doctors described the postmortem examination and the chemical tests carried out on the body. Arsenic, they said, had been clearly detected. This was actually they could clearly detect arsenic very well at this time. So they outlined Emile's symptoms and explained how much poisoning could resemble ordinary gastric illness, making it easy to mistake at first. Taken together, the pattern of illness and the test results supported the view that he had been exposed more than once over several weeks.
Slow poisoning, definitely. Under cross-examination, every alternative explanation was tested. Disease, contaminated food, accident, even self-administration were all raised. The defence pressed hard on the last point, suggesting that Emile might have taken the poison himself. Witnesses spoke of his anxieties and unsettled state of mind. Could this have been suicide? Could he have obtained arsenic independently? The doctors rejected those theories medically, but the possibilities had now been planted. The jury were reminded that if any reasonable alternative existed, conviction could not follow.
Well, then came the defense. They brought their own medical expertise. Dr. Douglas McLagan, an Edinburgh physician with a strong grounding in chemistry, focused on practical mechanics, what arsenic would and wouldn't do in ordinary use. In cold water, he said, so little arsenic dissolves that washing it in what is likely to cause harm even without the heat. He argued a meaningful solution required prolonged boiling. Tea and coffee and hot chocolates, he suggested, were much the same, and organic matter tended to reduce what could dissolve. Though thicker liquids could keep more poison suspended, on symptoms, he warned the jury that smaller doses could mimic, quote, British cholera attacks, and severe cases could resemble malignant cholera. And on one disputed sign, jaundice, he told the court it was not characteristic of arsenic poisoning.
The Crown then addressed means, how arsenic might have been obtained. 2 chemists were called. Both explained that arsenic was commonly sold in small quantities for household purposes and could be legally purchased with little suspicion.
Mm-hmm.
They described how, for safety, they coloured the poison before sale. Each man said he remembered serving Madeleine Smith and measuring out arsenic for her in the weeks before Emil's final illness.
The defense challenged them closely. Months have passed. The shops were busy. Could they truly be certain of one customer among hundreds? And if the arsenic they sold was tinted for identification, why had the poison found in Emil's body shown no such coloring? The chemists held their recollections, but the chain was no longer clean or certain. Even if she bought arsenic, it did not prove that this was the arsenic that had killed him. And still, despite all the testimony, a gap remained. No witness could describe the poison being administered. No one placed Madeleine at Emil's side at the fatal moment. There was no glass, no packet, no direct act the jury could point to. The prosecution had motive and purchase, but not the deed itself.
So the Crown turned to the longest and most unusual part of its case, the correspondence. Dozens of private letters recovered from Emil's room and from the Smiths' home were brought into court, bundled and arranged on the clerk's desk. They were brought in as evidence, not as summaries or impressions, but as the writer's own words. Even their order became contested. Some dates unclear, some envelopes smudged or missing, leaving both sides to argue over exactly when each letter had been written.
Oh, goodness gracious, here we go. This was really cool because there was a book that was written, and they preserved all of it, and their letters are actually preserved in a museum.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yep.
So you can probably go and visit and have a look at the letters in person. That'd be interesting.
Well, some of the letters were read in full. Others were read in long extracts, but they were always presented exactly as written. The jury heard the sentences themselves, without paraphrase or commentary. Over hours, then days, the relationship unfolded line by line, the courtroom quiet except for the steady voice of the reader and the scratch of reporters' pens.
Well, the first letters read were Madeleine's. Many had been carefully kept by Emil, folded and tied together. She signed herself Minnie, and her early notes were warm and openly affectionate. One passage was read aloud. Quote, "Would you not, sweet love, put your arms around your Minnie? Sorry."
What are you sorry about? What's wrong?
A female's genital area is what we call a Minnie sometimes.
So a slang term for it is.
Yeah.
I
so
doubt that.
Just saying that that
I
quote
don't.
is just kind of through my brain. Sorry, guys.
As I was writing this and I saw that it was yours, I was like,
Yeah,
she's going to have to read that.
Anyway, let me try and say this seriously. So one passage was read aloud. Quote, "Would you not, sweet love, put your arms around your Minnie, fondly embrace her and make her warm?" Unquote. Another followed. Quote, "All this day I have wished for you. One moment to kiss you, to lay my head upon your breast would make me happy." Unquote. There was nothing guarded about them. The tone was intimate and certain.
That's very it is very intimate. You don't just say that to someone you know, an acquaintance. That is intimate. And this is all just being aired out in front of everybody.
I can imagine the distraught on the parent's face, like, oh my God, I can't believe this is all being said in front of all these people. And
yep.
God.
Well, then it's Emil's letters that were read. His voice matched hers, but his notes often fixed on practical details, times, places, and arrangements. Quote, "Why, my beloved, did you not come to me? I waited and watched for you, but you came not. I shall wait again tomorrow night, the same hour and arrangement." These weren't vague hopes. They were planned meetings, specific nights, specific doors, a routine.
Madeleine answered in the same language of closeness. She called him her husband and signed herself as his wife. Quote, "Your own dear, devoted and loving wife, Minnie Lanjulière."
Close enough.
Well, that'll have to do until I learn French. She wrote about caring for him when he was ill, sitting beside him, wishing they could live together openly. The Crown argued that this showed not fantasy but familiarity, the kind of private access and opportunity that required no witnesses.
Well, now, after all that, they were really lovey-dovey, and they were
quite sweet letters.
Sweet, they're in love. But as the letters moved forward in time, the mood began to change. Outside that correspondence, her family had expected her to marry, obviously.
Yep.
The dude upstairs. Suitors were discussed, and one name appeared repeatedly, that William Minnick. Emil heard the rumors, and his tone shifted from affection to doubt. A long letter was read slowly, and we're just going to grab some excerpts here. Quote, "Your cold, indifferent notes fully convince me there is a foundation in your marriage with another." Then, more directly, he said, quote, "Answer me this. Is it true that you are, directly or indirectly, engaged to anyone else but me? These questions I must know." For the first time, the letters sounded suspicious, not romantic.
Well, after that, her replies changed as well. The warmth thinned and the language grew defensive as she tried to counter what he had heard. Quote, "Believe nothing till I tell you myself. I love you and you only." She explained who had spoken to her and how rumours might have spread. The tone felt strained now, less certain, as though she was trying to steady a relationship already beginning to fracture.
Then the fear appeared. The sentences became urgent, almost breathless.
Quote, "For God's sake, do nothing till I see you. Write to no one, not to Papa or any other. Do not send my letters."
Each line sounded less like affection and more like alarm. As they were read aloud, the courtroom grew noticeably quieter, the earlier romance giving way to anxiety.
Finally came the pleas, words that seemed written in panic rather than love. Quote, "Do not bring me to open shame. For God's sake, do not denounce me. I am the most guilty, miserable wretch on the face of the earth. I will die." By this stage, the letters no longer described a romance. They described someone terrified of exposure. In her world, scandal meant social ruin for her and her family.
That does seem like a lot of fear, a lot of panic.
Mm-hmm.
And it does give you that motive saying, you got to get rid of this guy or your whole family's going down in social ruin. Everyone will look down upon you. Crazy. Well, then one final sentence was read on its own.
Quote, "You must destroy my letters."
There were audible reactions in the gallery. The Crown called it consciousness of guilt, proof that she knew the correspondence was dangerous. The defense argued it meant something else entirely, fear of disgrace, not fear of prosecution.
Well, throughout, the judge reminded the jury not to confuse shock with proof. Immorality was not murder, and they were not there to punish impropriety. Circumstantial evidence, he said, had to exclude every reasonable alternative. If suicide, accident, or another source of poison could not be ruled out, they must acquit. Suspicion alone, however strong, was not enough.
Yep. You can't just, because at this point, if she's found guilty, she'll hang.
Yeah, back in them days.
That is a big, big deal. But after 9 days of testimony, the jury retired to consider their verdict. They were asked to rule on separate charges, administering poison on specific occasions and the charge of murder itself. When they returned, the answers reflected the uncertainty. On one count, not guilty. On the others, the uniquely Scottish compromise, not proven. In law, Madeleine Smith walked free and could never be tried again, but the trial had already laid everything bare. Her private words, her fears, her relationship, all read aloud in public and recorded line by line. The case ended inside that courtroom. The letters, once hidden, had become in permanent record.
The verdict ended the trial, but it did not restore anything like normality. In legal terms, the case was finished. Under Scots law, a verdict of not proven was a full acquittal. Madeleine could not be retried, and no punishment followed. Outside the courtroom, however, the uncertainty remained.
Yeah, you're still going to have people going, oh, well, I think she did it. And that's it. Social ruin.
Yep.
Well, reaction was immediate and sharply divided. Newspapers across Scotland reported the verdict in detail, often with strong opinions attached. Some called it a failure of justice, an admission that a man had died and no one had been held responsible. Others defended it as the law working exactly as it should, arguing that doubt, however troubling, could never be converted into guilt. Rather than closing the story, the verdict pushes it into public debate.
For the Smith family, the consequences were practical and immediate. They left Glasgow soon after the trial and did not return to Blythswood Square. Whatever protection respectability had once offered was gone. Their name had been printed in court reports and newspapers across the country. Even with an acquittal, their place in the city's careful social world was no longer secure, and starting again elsewhere became the only realistic option.
Yep. You just got to go, well, our time here is done.
Need to go somewhere where people don't really know us.
Yeah, just go and rebuild.
They might know our name, but they don't know what we look like.
Yep. Madeleine's own life moved away from Scotland altogether. In 1861, she married William George Levine, an artist and designer in London. They spent much of their lives in England and abroad and had 2 children together. She did not seek attention and made no attempt to return to the society that had once defined her life. From that point on, her existence was deliberately private and largely removed from public view.
She lived for more than 70 years after the trial. Madeleine Smith died on the 12th of April of 1928, aged 93,
Wow.
legally acquitted. No confession ever emerged, no new evidence surfaced, and the central question raised in 1857, who had administered the poison, remained unanswered at the time of her death.
The case itself developed a different kind of afterlife. It became a touchstone in Scottish legal history, cited in discussions about circumstantial evidence, prosecutorial limits, and the burden placed on juries. Above all, it became inseparable from the not proven verdict. The verdict had existed long before 1857, but this trial fixed it in public memory as more than a technical option.
So, not proven remained a distinctive feature of Scots law, a third outcome alongside guilty and not guilty. Reforms passed in 2025, just last year, changed that system, and from the January the 1st of 2026, juries return only 2 verdicts. The option that defined the Madeleine Smith trial no longer exists, leaving her case as one of the most prominent historical examples of how that verdict once shaped public understanding of justice.
Yep. It's gone now.
Yep.
And it took till just this year.
Yeah.
Just this year. Just
finalized just January this year. That's madness.
Yep. Well, Pierre-Emile L'Angelier died without knowing how or why his life ended. The court established the cause of his death, but responsibility was never legally fixed. That absence sits at the heart of the story, affecting everyone involved. The dead man, the accused woman, and the society left to interpret what the evidence could suggest, but never could conclusively prove.
With more than a century and a half later, the case endures not because it shocks, but because it refuses to resolve. It illustrates the limits of the law as clearly as its powers. Courts can determine what is provable, not always what is true. When certainty isn't possible, restraint becomes the verdict. And sometimes that is the only honest ending available.
Well, that was the story of The Lover, the Letters, and the Poison, and Madeleine Smith and Emile.
It's an interesting old case there.
Yep. That was really, really I couldn't believe that they had preserved all of the letters and everything, and I was able to find we can get excerpts of what they actually wrote back then.
That's mad.
It was absolutely amazing. I was cheering. I was
so
"Woo, that's so cool!"
Yeah.
But
you'd think everything like that from that time period would just be destroyed, lost along the way or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think when you come across that these things have been kept, it's quite interesting to actually see. I mean, obviously, it's so different, the style of writing back then. Nobody sort of tends to write like they used to back in those times. And yeah, it was just very interesting.
Yeah. And then how they built the case. Yes, it was circumstantial. And there's been plenty of cases where people have been convicted under circumstantial evidence.
Yes.
But it's you can prove that she met him, she bought some arsenic and did all, but you can't prove that she put it in there.
Yeah.
You cannot prove without a reasonable doubt that she actually poisoned him. You don't have that smoking gun, like you said earlier. So not proven was actually probably the best outcome.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. You want justice for Emile.
Of course. Yeah.
But from his letters, I wouldn't think that he was going to commit suicide.
No,
he was like, no, we're together. We are going to get married. He was thinking that was his thinking.
But then if she's, defiant and saying, you need to get rid of my letters, being quite forthcoming with, we are done sort of situation, then who knows? But you wouldn't do it, I wouldn't have thought, by poison, especially if he's,
most of the time with men,
not slowly.
They don't do that.
Exactly.
That is, statistically.
But if you was going to commit suicide, what I'm saying is, it wouldn't be you wouldn't do a slow process to yourself, would you? So
that would be like torturing yourself.
Yeah.
Over time with arsenic, that would be horrible.
Yeah.
You would just take it all at once, and that'd be that.
Yeah.
But there was
obviously we strongly advise doing anything like that. Do seek help if you are feeling suicidal.
Please don't.
There is plenty of help out there for you guys.
Yeah, but there will be plenty of other ways, opioids. You just do that, go to sleep or whatever, arsenic is a horrible way to go. So there's a lot of theories. I would love to hear what people think about it. Give us down in the comments what you think about the case. What did he do it? Did Madeleine do it? Was it someone else or?
Yeah, see, even that's a possibility. What if someone found out, someone that was close to her found out and was like, oh God, we can't be having this, you know, her,
Yeah, we got rid of this
you
guy.
know, they're talking about being a wife and a husband and stuff. Not good for our standing. And, you know, so who knows? But it does seem to point to her, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy case. Okay, so if you like what we do here and would like to support us, please take a moment to follow the show and leave us a 5-star rating, all that good stuff. It helps others discover our stories and keeps the archive growing. Sharing the podcast with someone who loves true crime also makes a huge difference.
Most definitely. You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Murder Most British and on Facebook at MMB Podcast. And if you want to chat with us or other listeners, come and join us on the Public Crypt. It's our free Discord space with case discussions, theories, and updates from the archive.
So everything you need, socials, Discord, and more, is in our link tree below.
So until next week again, guys, stay safe and stay curious.
Bye-bye.